All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube, another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. And before I get started, I want to apologize in advance because there are some issues in the chat box tonight. Please drop your comments if you have something to say. I will definitely respond to them as soon as I can. Probably won't hear on the live feed, but I'll definitely respond to those. And apologies once again. But clearly, want to be talking about what's going on right now with the Arizona Cardinals and their now soon to be former starting quarterback in Kyler Murray. And of course, the writing for this has been on the wall for several months now. Okay, and of course, we saw the Cardinals make it official today as they announced that they have informed their now former starting quarterback Kyler Murray that he's going to be released when the NFL's new league year begins later this month. This marks the end of Kyler Murray's 7-year run with the Cardinals after he was the first overall pick by this franchise back in 2019. But we all know it never completely worked out for Kyler Murray in Arizona, as it was one of those weird things. He was always a highlight reel waiting to happen. But more often than not, the Cardinals lost too many games with him at quarterback that they should have won. And at the end of the day, they just did not win enough games overall. Kyler Murray is 38 or was 38, 48 and 1 as the Cardinals starting quarterback. And he only had one winning season with the franchise, which came back in 2021. And with Murray as a starting quarterback, Arizona made one trip to the postseason. Of course, that was 2021. And there they were one and done in the playoffs as they lost to the eventual Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. And in Kyler Murray's one playoff start, he was a paltry 19 of 34 passing for just 137 yards, no TDs, and two interceptions. But again, nobody should really be surprised by this news today, as we all knew that this was going to happen. Cardinals general manager Monty Ossenfort was not the one who gave Kyler Murray that massive $230 million extension back in 2022. That was Ossenfort's predecessor, Steve Keim. And even with Steve Keim, there was some reluctance from the Cardinals front office to give Kyler Murray that extension. It basically was one of those that came down to the 11th hour. And Arizona really was not convinced that he was studying film or taking football serious. And my biggest question is, do you see Kyler Murray as a leader on the football field? And honestly, he's not. Okay. Now, as Arizona has made the decision to move on from Kyler Murray, instead of allowing that $19.5 million salary to kick in for 2027, uh, if he were on the roster by March 16th, it shows that this franchise is looking not only to go in another direction with general manager Monty Ossenfort, but also with their new head coach in Mike LaFleur. And like I always say, you inherit, some guys on your team. Sometimes you want to roll with them, sometimes you don't. And this is clearly a case where you don't want to roll with this guy because, again, the GM and the new head coach did not bring Kyler Murray in. Mike LaFleur is going to want his guys. On top of that, Arizona can finish in last place without Kyler Murray. They clearly finished there this year. I know he didn't play the bulk of the season, but nonetheless, they're going to go in a new direction, and it's going to start at the quarterback position. So, of course, with that said, where do the Cardinals go at the quarterback position? Because this is not the deepest NFL draft at that position. Arizona's picking third overall. There's probably only going to be one other quarterback besides Fernando Mendoza, who's going first overall to the Raiders. That's probably going to go first round. That'd be Ty Simpson, maybe mid to late first round. If you're the Cardinals, you're clearly not going to use the third overall pick on a Ty Simpson. So where do they go from here? Do they try to draft somebody later in the draft? Do they go for a trade? do they go out there in free agency? We've got to wait and see. But one thing we know, Jacoby Brissett was Arizona starter for the bulk of 2025. He's not going to be their guy at that position going, forward long term at least. So with that said, could a veteran like a Kirk Cousins, who's going to be out there because he's going to be released by Atlanta, or even a Tua Tagovailoa, who's expected to be released uh, by the Miami Dolphins, could they be enticing enough to the Cardinals? Well, I feel like if you're going to bring in Tua, you might as well have kept Kyler Murray. That's number one. Kirk Cousins is a guy. He's going to put up numbers, but at the end of the day, you ain't going to win a lot of games either. Okay. So there's really not a lot of options out there for the Arizona Cardinals currently at quarterback. But again, to me, this just smells like, you know what? We just want to end this relationship and go in a different direction. So on the flip side of this equation, what is next for Kyler Murray? Could some teams like the Minnesota Vikings, Pittsburgh Steelers, New York Jets, and Miami Dolphins possibly be interested in his services? Well, the Vikings look like they have a need at quarterback because we know the whole fiasco that came out of that organization regarding now the former Viking quarterback Sam Darnold, who helped the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, and of course J.J. McCarthy. Everybody there apparently is not sold on J.J. McCarthy. The Pittsburgh Steelers. What's going to happen there under first year head coach Mike McCarthy? And I say first year, of course, not first around the NFL, but first with the Steelers. It all is going to boil down to that Aaron Rodgers situation right there. You've got the New York Jets. It's one of those where clearly the Jets need a quarterback, but they need playmakers on both sides of the ball. Is that going to be enticing for Kyler Murray? And then, of course, like I said, the Miami Dolphins could be in that mix as well. But whoever signs Kyler Murray, because somebody's going to sign Kyler Murray, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're going to get him on the cheap because Arizona still has to pay him $36 million for the upcoming season. So it could be a scenario where he goes to a team for 1 year, maybe $5 to $10 million, maybe an incentive laden deal. And you simply just take it from there. And again, this is another example, and we've seen this happen with the quarterback position more often than not in recent years, where we've seen veteran quarterbacks getting released because teams want to go in another direction. Teams are going to look to trade their veteran quarterback like a Kyler Murray, but at the end of the day, nobody, and I hope Arizona knew this as well, nobody was going to take that deal. So it resulted in them having to release him. Now, with Murray's departure in Arizona, it will mean that only San Francisco 49ers defensive end Nick Bosa is the only player who was taken in the top six of the 2019 draft, who is still with the original team that selected him. And that's very interesting because you think about it, 2019 is less than a decade ago, folks. And with that said, when you draft a guy in the first round, especially in the top 10, you are hopeful that you have yourself an anchor on your franchise for at least the next decade. And of course, a lot of teams consistently whiff early on in the NFL draft. And I guarantee you, you're going to see some teams whiff next month in the first round as well. But it's also telling not just of the top six in that draft, but also of what has been happening, the trend in the last 10 years or so in the National Football League as far as quarterbacks who are taken in the top 10 of the draft. And of course, they sooner rather than later, the team that they're with is moving on. And typically, bad organizations make bad decisions. I will say this in the case of Kyler Murray: the Cardinals are not the greatest organization in the world. That's number one. But you go back to Kyler Murray's best season, 2021, the Cardinals tried their hardest to put everything around them. They brought in Cliff Kingsbury as the head coach. You had James Conner at wide at our running back, Duke Hopkins, AJ Green at wide receiver. You name it. They basically gave Kyler Murray everything possible as far as putting the pieces around him, and he still could not take them to that next level. I look at Kyler Murray, and for him to take that next step, and I've been saying this for quite some time, for him to take that next step in the National Football League as a starting quarterback, he is going to have to make more plays from the pocket with his arm. Yes, he can scramble around, but he's had multiple leg injuries. If these things start to catch up to him, and at some point, he's got to go out there and he's going to have to make more plays from the pocket consistently with his arm. But it's not just about the skills, because guess what? You could get away with the athleticism at the high school level. You could get away with that athleticism in college when he was at both Texas A&M and Oklahoma. But guess what? Kyler Murray is a guy under 6 feet. He's probably about 220, maybe 210, maybe soaking wet. But nonetheless, you've got linebackers who are just as fast as you in the National Football League. And the same could be said with defensive ends. And on top of that, with you having multiple leg injuries now, it's going to slow you down a little bit. So again, he's going to have to learn to be a better passer of the football, and he's going to have to learn how to do that from the pocket. So with that said, you look at it and you ask yourself, what is Kyler Murray's legacy in Arizona? Well, unfortunately for him, his last game as a starting quarterback of the Cardinals, you go back to early in the 2025 season when Arizona blew a 21-3 lead at home to the previously winless Tennessee Titans, a game that the Cardinals went out of their way to give away. And of course, that is exactly what they did. They simply gave that game away. And I think that kind of summed up things for Kyler Murray during his time with the Arizona Cardinals. He was a guy who would put up highlight reel plays, highlight reel stats, and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, more often than not, his team lost. And I think wherever he lands, because somebody is going to sign Kyler Murray, I want to see if he could change that narrative. And I also want to see how hungry he's going to be, with the new team, because I think he's going to have to be better focused. I think he's also going to have to be a better leader of the locker room, not just the offensive side, but the defensive side of the football as well. But again, he's getting paid 36, or he's going to get paid 36 million this season from the Cardinals. You can get him on the cheap, but he's still got to go out there and try to prove himself for another long-term deal. So like I said, I'm very interested to see how hungry that he's going to be and how determined and focused that he will be for 2026. But again, like I said before, the Cardinals can be a bad team without Kyler Murray. Okay, and they've proven that. And they weren't a great team with him either. And going forward, this franchise, they have to figure out how are they going to close the gap on the other three teams in this division. You have the defending champs in the Seahawks. You also have the Rams and the 49ers, who are playoff teams. Two of the four teams in this division that Arizona has to deal with were in the NFC Championship game just about a month and a half ago. Okay, so it's an uphill battle for this organization to try to close that gap. Clearly, they weren't going to do anything more with Kyler Murray as their guy at quarterback, and they decided it's time for us to go in a new direction. So let's see what happens with the Cardinals at quarterback, and let's see where Kyler Murray lands for his next NFL city. But like I said, there will definitely be some interest in him around the league, because unfortunately right now in the National Football League, there are more teams that need quality quarterbacks than there are quality quarterbacks out there. So Kyler Murray will definitely have some interest from multiple teams on the free agent front. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Once again, apologies. There's some issues with the chat box tonight. So like I said, if you drop some comments in there, I definitely will get back to you on those as soon as possible. Also, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, it will be my pleasure to do the same in return. And that also goes for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, definitely be sure to check out the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.